Well, hello, this is Deborah Johnson, and this is Women at Halftime podcast. And we are all about helping you move ahead at the mid-career halftime of life. For these are your very, very best years. And we equip you to be able to do that with a number of things, including your mindset. And today's episode, I am thrilled to introduce you to Rhonda Nelson, a renowned patient advocate for those diagnosed with AERD. If you don't know what that is, that's Aspirin Exacerbated Respiratory Disease. Now, Rhonda's mission is to empower those facing this challenging diagnosis while encouraging women to reinvent themselves at every stage of life. Also, as a wife of a touring musician, we'll hear about that, she navigates the dynamic balance between advocacy and life on the road, managing the ups and downs of being constantly on the move while staying grounded in her purpose. So whether you are navigating health challenges, seeking inspiration to reinvent yourself, or you're just curious about balancing life on the road, well, this episode is for you. So stay tuned for an insightful conversation. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media and HalftimeSuccess.com, offering resources and insights for those at mid-career or the halftime of life. Explore our diverse categories, including courses, coaching, health, music, software, and travel. We're here to help you make this stage of life your best ever. So get our new articles, downloads, and podcasts by signing up for weekly updates at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello. I'm thrilled to have Rhonda with us today. Rhonda, thank you for joining us. We are going to have a wonderful conversation.
I am excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, it'll be fun. So, I usually like my guests, even though I've done a little bit of an introduction, but I like my guests to give a little bit of their background, just a brief background. And then we're going to get into our topic, which is navigating chronic illness. And boy, that seems to be a real topic when you are over 50, sometimes over 40. It doesn't matter. But chronic illness is huge right now in our world and in our country. So can you give a little bit of your background?
Sure. So in 2000, I became sick with what I thought was a cold. And for the next 2 years, I was searching for an answer and for a diagnosis. And I was increasingly getting sicker and sicker. Um, and then, luckily stumbled upon a physician that was able to give me a diagnosis which is I have AERD, which is Aspirin Exacerbated Respiratory Disease.
That is
So
hard to say, by the way.
it is.
I tried it in the introduction. I was hoping I got it right. Good. Okay.
And, back then it was called Samter's Triad because it is a triad of 3 components.
Mhm.
I was grateful for a diagnosis. I was blown away by the fact that there is no cure. And we just have to live medically managed with this disease. And so, but that began my journey. My journey to, to just understanding the disease, understanding how it affects not only the patient, but also those around the patient, their family, their caregivers, and even how it affects relationships with friends and family, because outwardly we look completely fine. We don't, we don't have anything that marks us like other diseases do so sometimes so often.
Mhm.
And so through the years, the research and the medications have become uh, more advanced, and being medically managed or medically well managed, I should say, is a lot easier than it was 20 some odd years ago.
Mhm.
But having said that, the medications that manage this disease well are incredibly expensive, and in some parts of the world are still not available to people and
Wow.
or available easily to people. And so that's where my path for patient advocacy grew.
Mm,
I became involved with Allergy Asthma Network, commonly known as AAN, and
mhm,
just in doing things with them, they have a Capitol Hill Day where we go and we just speak to your representatives and to your congresspeople and whatever bills happen to be prevalent in that particular season. We talk to them about them and try to get bills passed, not only for AERD, because AAN has a lot of diseases
mhm,
under its umbrella. But because of my work in that regards with them, then fast forward a few years, and now I sit on the executive board.
mhm,
So I'm very passionate about, um, just patient advocacy all the way around, whether
mm,
it's help talking about or obtaining affordable care, affordable medications, and
mhm,
just what it's like to be a middle-aged woman and living with a chronic illness.
mm. Yeah, how difficult. Um, Especially that there's really no cure. These some of these, there's just naturopathic, there's all sorts of different sort of solutions that people say with some of these issues that you've got. But I'm sure you've probably pursued everything to be able to do that. But yes, how interesting. What were some of your symptoms? Because that may help maybe some listeners thinking, I've been wondering what's wrong with me, or at least maybe a part of this.
Mhm,
But were some of those symptoms you got worse and worse? So, it's not like melanoma or anything else that
mhm.
something spreading and all of that. It's all of a sudden you're just feeling bad, or what was it?
So it started out, I thought I had a cold.
Yes. Okay.
And actually, I wasn't at home at the time. So my husband and I were newly married, and he still had a home in California, but our home together was in Tennessee. And so we were out there for about, I don't know, about 6 weeks maybe. And so I thought it was a cold, but I also thought that it possibly could be just Um, just some typical when you're in a different area, maybe get a little
Right.
bit of hay fever or something like that.
Right.
But it wasn't, then I get back home and it wasn't getting better, but it actually was getting worse.
Mm,
And I had never had allergies or
mm-hmm,
asthma as a child,
mm-hmm,
or as a teenager, or as a young adult. So I was in my very early 30s when this all started. And
mm,
so I didn't even go down that path, right? Like, I didn't even think that that could be what it was, but what was happening was I was I had gotten so congested and my nasal passages had been basically closed off by nasal polyps, so I
mm,
was breathing through my mouth and, just I would get set off with what's known as flares or what I call flares, which means something would set me off and it would trigger this horrific congestion, wheezing, tightening of the chest, asthmatic symptoms. And so a lot of times I would take, you have constant pressure in your head, and I would take an Aleve or I would take something like that. And within 15, 20 minutes, I'd be gasping and wheezing and whatever.
mm.
And that's where
Wow.
the aspirin sensitivity comes in. So the components of this are um, chronic nasal sinusitis, rhinositis,
Mm,
nasal passages, and then the second component is asthma, and the third component, which is the most difficult to diagnose or to figure out, is the sensitivity to aspirin and NSAIDs.
oh,
And so what was happening was I was taking these over the counter NSAIDs to, just to give me some kind of relief. And it was, in fact, causing me to be worse.
Yes.
And so, that's really the hardest part of this disease to figure out. As
Wow.
simple as it sounds, it's quite difficult because we don't think that
Mm.
you just don't put 2 and 2 together, if you will, you know?
No. And especially, I mean, especially aspirin. It would seem, who's allergic to aspirin or who's, who has a
Right.
response to that? So, yeah, but those things combined, yeah, getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and then having the polyps and
Mhm.
not being able to breathe, that's kind of scary. Asthma is scary in itself.
It Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's when you can't breathe. No, I've had allergies, hay fever my whole life, but I've never really
Mhm.
had asthma. But I have been, I was a camp counselor, when I was in high school, college, young years, and I remember having a camper that had asthma. I thought she was gonna die. I was so nervous. Well, I was so young, I had no idea how to deal with it, but it was in the middle of the night, and I just took her outside, and I said, "Okay, what do I do with this girl?" And, I didn't know. I thought, "Oh, no, this is not what I want. This was not my idea of a good time."
Right?
But, I kinda walked her through. She ended up having some sorta inhaler, but it's scary. It's just scary, and especially if
Mhm.
you haven't had that before. So, now what sort of challenges you talk about challenges that women have, especially after age
Mhm.
50. Now, so how old were you when you actually got your diagnosis?
I was in my early 30s, very early 30s.
So you've had it a long time.
Mhm.
Wow. So, at that point, what sort of, what could help you when you finally diagnosed this? There was, something that could help you, and then, will that help everybody after age 50, or when they diagnose this, or they get this diagnosis? What did you
So, a lot of trial and error with things
Mm.
back then.
Right.
Of course, I was initially prescribed allergy shots.
Yeah.
That only made me worse.
Oh.
Um,
Mm.
you have the polyp removal surgeries, which then they clear, that immediately clears your air passages.
Right.
But for many AERD patients,
Mm.
they start to grow back within months.
Wow.
But one of the very first things that was looked at for me, and back then was one of the best paths to being medically managed, was to be desensitized to aspirin. So
Mm.
basically, what that is that you are in a medical setting, and you're given small doses of aspirin in intervals. In my case, I was admitted to the hospital, and we did it in ICU, but only because I was only the second patient that my doctor had done this with. And also because my conditions were so severe, he wanted to
Mm.
be um,
Monitoring.
proactive about
Yeah.
being in a correct environment. So I started out with basically what was equivalent to um, a quarter of a baby aspirin. And
Okay.
I immediately went into anaphylactic shock. So you do the
Mm.
albuterol and whatever. And we did this procedure
Mm.
until all the way that we worked up to where I could take 600 milligrams of aspirin with no reaction. And
Wow.
then in turn, what that means is you are then on a high dose of daily aspirin
Mm.
to keep you desensitized. Now, realize that that brings with it, in some patients, a lot of other
Right.
problems.
Right.
And then it
Blood
also
thinning. Yeah. A lot of stuff.
exactly,
Yes.
absolutely. It can be hard on your GI tract.
Yes.
So it's not without its own issues.
Right.
But fast forward, there have been drugs that had been figured out to maintain us well.
Mhm.
And then now, fast forward even into where we are today, there are several biologics that work really, really well for us patients. Um,
Wonderful.
but those biologics bring about some pretty severe side effects that some, and I want to really stress, some patients experience. Not all patients do.
Mhm.
Um, it's, they're relatively new, so we're still
Mhm.
compiling years and years of data of what those side effects look like. I'm actually on my third biologic because after um, a little over 2 years, the first biologic created within me, it basically made my joints like they had cement in them.
Oh, wow. Ooh.
And so then I wasn't able to be very mobile. It was
Yeah.
quite difficult. Um,
Mm.
and so none of this, it's like anything else. None of the drugs that are available are without some other things that can happen. But I have chosen through the years to also find the non-traditional modalities that work really well for me and keep things really balanced for me, whether those are supplements or, um, you know, infrared saunas, chiropractic
Mhm.
care, acupuncture,
Mhm.
all of these things. They're not going to be a cure. And what I always say whenever I speak to patients is you have to try and do the things that work with you or work
Yeah.
for you
Mhm.
the best. We may all have the same disease, but we
Mhm.
don't all respond exactly the same way to all the different medications.
Right.
And so you have to be your own advocate with your care team
Mhm.
and really stay on top of things.
That's such a good word of advice. I read a lot. I do a lot of book reviews and, all that, but I read a lot of those naturopathic books as well. And there's, a lot of different between herbal teas, between, all of the different tinctures, everything, that you can do.
Mhm.
But yeah, finding out what works for you, not to totally substitute, but to enhance your care, and hopefully that you don't have to be so reliant on just a new medication coming out or something else. But you
Mhm.
need to have something. So good for you, and you seem to be coping now.
Mhm.
Hopefully, you have another medication that's not going to make your joints feel like cement. Oh, that'd be awful.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah,
just be
it
awful.
was listen, it took me as long as I was on that drug for 2 years. It's taken me
Wow.
2 years to get back to what my normal was with my joints. But here was part of the problem because at that point, I'm in my mid-50s
Yes.
and, now you're going through menopause, and menopause brings its own kind of things for us
Mm-hmm.
women, right?
Yes.
And joint issues is a real thing for menopausal women. And
Right.
so
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to have r- really tough conversations with my
Mm-hmm.
physicians because I had to
Yes.
say, listen, we can't just chalk this up to
Mhm.
everything is menopausal. Like, I'm not
Right.
gonna
Right.
stand for that
No.
because
Good for you.
I think there are things that are pointing that that's not the only answer.
Yeah.
And so, I encourage people, eh, go in armed with your research,
Yeah.
journal what's going on with your body
It's a
before you
great point.
go to
Yeah.
your physicians because let's face it, we only get a small window now. Gone are the days that we sit with most of our
Yeah.
physicians for
Mhm.
more than 15 or 20 minutes, like,
Yes.
And
Right.
so go in there ready and armed
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
your questions, with what's been going on with your body. They don't
Mhm.
know between
Mhm.
appointments what's going on.
Mhm.
And if you don't have it put down, you're going
Mhm.
to forget. Like, let's just face it, you're going to forget.
I love that you, are journaling and, you do all of that. In fact, this last year, I started doing that with some of my blood work
Hmm.
because I don't want a doctor telling me they have to do, "Oh, you gotta go on this medication, you gotta know," and I'm thinking, "No, that's normal for me." I'm
Yeah,
looking back at my records if I'm seeing somebody new, especially because they were
absolutely.
walking in, and it's like, did you look at like my last 3 blood tests and
Yep.
how similar? This is kind of my normal state. So I wanted to, when I come into a doctor's appointment, I want to have enough, and I want to do some of my own research.
Mhm.
So, and I had just told one of my friends, and a couple weeks ago, I said, I'm I have a borderline like osteoporosis, just because it's
Mhm.
hereditary. I had never even had a bone scan. It was my first one, and the doctor goes, "Oh, have you ever had one?" So I said, "I think it's hereditary." But she wanted me to go on a certain medication, and I said, "I'm not even saying yes until I do my own research." That is
Yeah.
really, really important. So I'm really glad that with your case, with this AERD, do I have that right? Yes, I do.
Mhm.
That there was when it first happened, it was there was not a whole lot known about it. You didn't
Right.
have any choices. Like, what do I do? What do I, where do you go? So that's more difficult. So I think though all of us do have choices. And doing things naturally. I have told my doctor that I'm not going on a certain something because I know I can bring my levels different. I can have less
Yeah.
sugar. And I did. I know what will work. And so you have done the same thing with your journaling. I think that's very, very smart. And it's very important reminder for all of us. Doesn't matter if we have a chronic disease or not, to
Mhm.
keep track. And I started just keeping track on an Excel sheet. And it was because it was kind of funny because it was one of a gal I walk with. She was keeping track of it for her parents. And I thought, well, I don't have my parents here, but I'm gonna keep track of it for
For
myself.
myself.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and I also, you know, let's just say most Western medicine doctors don't particularly want to hear
Mhm.
about the non-traditional things that
Exactly.
may choose to do. And
Right.
so you
You're
have
right.
to have a real
Mhm.
um good balance of,
Yes.
okay, I'm going to go to
Mhm.
my Western medicine doctors that are treating me for whatever they're treating me for, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go and I'm going to and they're going to
Mhm.
go down this path with me.
Right.
But then you also have to have a good balance and a good
Mhm.
discipline within yourself to
Yes.
um if you have things that work for you,
Right.
don't just dismiss them.
No.
And the other thing I think you know generations before us and even myself, I grew up, whatever the doctor said was the wherewithal and the be withal, and you didn't
Right.
deviate from that, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't agree with that now. I think we
Mhm.
have a lot of other paths that
We
we
sure
can
do.
explore.
Yes.
I don't necessarily think that everything a physician throws at us
Mhm.
is what possibly might be the correct things. I'm not saying that what they say is not right. I'm just saying
Right.
there might be other things that are better
I
and
agree.
they might be more holistic.
Right.
Um, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that have to
Make the
dictate what
choice.
we do with our bodies.
Right, right. It's our decision. It's
It's
our
our
bodies.
decision.
Yes, it's our
Absolutely.
decisions.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I love that, and, so, yeah, the easy way out, and when doctors have, you wanna give them credit, they have very little time,
Right.
and they've been their schedules are overloaded, and they're coming in and saying, "Okay, this," because that's what's expected, or
That's what
that's
they
what's
do.
easy. Yeah, that's
That's
what's
what they've
easy.
been taught, right?
It is, and what I don't like is when I have once in a while this happens, say, "Okay, you can have a heart attack, and you can do that." I mean, the scare tactic, if I don't
Mhm.
go on a certain medication, and I'm thinking, "That's not true."
Yeah.
I know that's because my level was up one time, and I brought it
Yeah.
down the next time, and I knew what it was. I knew
Yeah.
exactly what it was, in the blood work. So it's just interesting how you want to give them credit and you want to respect their authority and their
Mhm.
really their expertise, not just their
Mhm.
authority, their expertise. But also, it is our body, and I think that that's a really, really good point there. So, um,
But
yeah,
real
go ahead.
quick, I do wanna say something else about this, though.
Yes.
I 100% believe that there are some situations and some diseases that
Mm.
we must take medications for. And
Exactly.
I am a perfect example of that. I
Right.
have come off of everything else except my biologic medication, and
Hmm.
I have tried everything under the sun, and without that, I am not well medically managed. My disease
Yeah.
is not well medically managed. So I am forced that is the option for me.
Right.
But having said that, sometimes we get into this spiral of, our doctors, especially if you have a team of doctors. This doctor
Hmm.
will prescribe this, and then that has a side effect. So this doctor will prescribe that, and then
Right.
that, right? And so that's the part of the puzzle that I say we have to really research. We have to really kind of understand what works for our bodies, and maybe there are more natural ways to deal with the side effects than adding another drug to our protocol, our medication
Right.
regimen.
Right. Right. Really well said. Very, very well said. So, um, now let's get into a little bit of this. How does this affect those around you, like your spouse? You were newly married when this happened. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so add a little pressure onto a relationship. So, and you married, a musician, touring
Mhm,
musician, a
mhm,
band, and so, how has this affected your relationship together, and how do you do on the road? Because I'm sure you travel, and
mhm,
all of that. I mean, traveling itself. There's certain things I travel with because I know my body.
mhm.
So, and I'm sure there's certain things you travel with because you know your body. So, how how does this affect your relationship? And when you travel and you're on the road, your sleep is different, your timing is different. There's a lot of things that are different. So, why don't you expand on that a little bit?
So in the early days of this, I mean, first of all, I have to say, um, my husband is and has always been incredibly amazing about just the situation and what it means because part of the issue with the disease, especially when you're not breathing at a really great level, is our body isn't receiving enough oxygen, so you're constantly tired and fatigued. And but he's always been so supportive and so understanding. But what it meant in the early days is that either I wouldn't attend things or events, or I was a little apprehensive because I was afraid I would have a flare in public. And when I say a flare, it was not only an asthmatic situation, but it was also what happens is, I mean, I can do 100 gut sneezes in
Mm.
a matter of 15 or 20 minutes. And I mean hard sneezes. You become
Wow.
congested, your eyes watered.
Mm.
Um, so it's not just that I'm gasping for air and I'm going to have an asthmatic attack. Um,
Yeah, that would take
so
that would take the attention a little bit away from the band on stage, wouldn't
exactly, absolutely.
it?
But in the early days, we had the big nebulizers, and they were big and bulky, and they had to be plugged into an outlet.
Mm,
Um, and that made it a little difficult when you're flying because
yes.
you don't have exact 110 power on the plane like you need to run those. And
Mm,
so it was I was there was a lot of anxiety. There were many times that I was on the bus and would have one of these flares, and that created anxiety because there were 10 of us on the bus. And
uh-huh.
so I would have to go to the back lounge and sleep in the back lounge. And I was worried that I would wake up any of the people on the bus. Um, and then there were times when I actually had to be taken to the ER
Mhm.
while out on the road because we just couldn't get the attack under control. So
Mm.
the stress of that
Mm.
was very heavy to carry.
Mhm.
But fast forward now, again,
Mhm.
as technology has advanced, there are very tiny nebulizers that you use a USB charger or USB charger with that
Mhm.
you can carry in your purse and you can have on on the plane. And then also the travel has changed a little bit for us too. We have a separate bus from the band bus, and so on that bus I carry smaller versions of all of the non-conventional modalities that I use at home. So I use infrared sauna at home. I have an infrared sauna blanket.
Okay.
Um, I have, you know, I there's just other things. For instance, I use a vibration plate, if you will. It's small enough that I can carry that. Helps your lymph system circulate. I
Mm,
can carry that on the bus. So times have changed. So some of these modalities that maybe weren't affordable or financially feasible for people in the early years, there's there's ways to find them now. I also have a portable cupping set that I can take and I can just use it to loosen the fascia because I get a lot of tension and stuff in my neck area just from the breathing and whatnot. But you can do it yourself, and you
mm,
can get a set on Amazon. Whereas before, in the early years,
mm.
you had to go somewhere to do this kind of thing and pay someone to do this. So some of it you can do yourself in a more affordable way.
Wow. Yeah. Well, again, it shows how technology has improved and it's
Hmm.
grown. And I mean, it's one of the things that I talk about. In I have a new book coming out. As this is released, it'll be the book is released in July 8th. So I mean, it's coming. But I talk about technology and AI specifically,
Mhm,
but it's technology. So
mhm,
that has just really, really grown. And so it's an advantage in so many ways.
mhm.
And now, if you were to put that into a chat GPT or Grok or whatever you use, you would get all of these answers with your symptoms. All of a sudden, you'd know, oh, it could be this. Oh, I got a diagnosis. I mean, but then, whenever that was, you said you got it when you were first married. Oh my goodness, you've been married how long? Is it about 20,
25
20,
years this
20?
year.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
But 25 years ago, that wasn't there. We were
Right.
barely on, finding stuff on Google. So yeah, so that's really an advantage and using, and
Mhm,
especially medically. So, good for you, and it's such good reminder that not to be afraid of doing the normal medication and the way to go, but also to look at other things to supplement. But I love
mhm,
that you're using the infrared and you're using, I'm sure the acupuncture, the massage therapy, the cupping, all of that really, really helps.
mhm,
That's good for the body anyway. But then with that, it loosens things up. And
mhm.
there was a time, this doesn't happen as much to me anymore, but if I usually have a deep tissue massage every, usually 4 to 6 weeks. So I work a lot
Mhm.
at the computer. And then if I'm doing work at a piano, whatever, it's just my shoulders and my back,
Yep.
you can just really feel that. But it loosens things up. And I used to feel like I had a cold afterwards because it was loosening up
Yes.
all of these areas. And, all of a sudden you have all of that, it's good for you.
Yeah.
You
The
have
toxins are moving through your body, and
they're
we have
working through. Yeah. So
yes.
these sort of, that's why I'm proactive on that. I think it's
Mhm.
important when people go, oh, you get a massage. No, mine is a deep tissue. Mine is it can hurt,
Yes.
but it's
Yes, it is.
important. Yeah. It's important to have, those muscles just, rubbed out hard and to make sure that's loosened up. And so I think that's wonderful that you are using all of that as well. But it is a challenge being on the road and being on a bus. How nice that you've got your own vehicle because that would be a huge challenge. How big is the band? You said there were 10 members
So
or
there's band members, there's 5, including my husband, and then
okay.
crew, we carried
Right.
4.
Okay.
And then obviously the driver and me, so that,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
makes for a very crowded
Yeah.
bus. Another modality that I I mean, I 100%
Mm.
um, swear by is cold plunge. And I happen to have a cold
Mm.
plunge unit here at home. I
Mm.
mean, it's big. It's like a,
Mhm.
but I have seen in
Mm.
several stores. As a matter of fact, I saw one in Costco the other day. Um, and it's a portable cold plunge unit. So
Mhm.
basically, you
Wow.
just need a air compressor to blow it up. It's a round.
Mhm.
It's very small. It's very compact. So a lot of these modal, and it's for what it is, it's
Mhm.
very reasonably priced. So a lot of these things that were not financially
Mhm.
reachable for others,
Mhm.
now we're seeing forms of them that people can use
Mm.
and be able to afford. The sauna blanket that I use truly, um, the only difference is that I you lay down and you zip yourself up in it, your head is out. At
Mm.
home, mine's a huge it's a thing that I walk in, sit down. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in there long enough that I do some reading and some
Yes.
thinking and whatnot in there. Um, but the benefit of it is
Mhm.
the same.
Yes.
Um,
Wow.
you can get very
Mhm.
small portable red light panels that are
Mhm.
very affordable. The red light therapy is
Mhm.
great for inflammation. And
Yes.
here's what I have come to realize in a lot of the reading that I've done and whatever. A lot of what is about AERD is it's inflammation. It's inflammation in the body.
Mhm.
Disease within itself creates
Mhm.
inflammation, pretty
Yes.
much,
Right.
whatever kind of disease we're talking about.
Mhm.
So, any of the things that you can do to reduce the inflammation in your body
Mhm.
is going to give you some relief, just by the nature of what you're doing. I mean, it's
Wow.
not going to cure you. It's not, but you're going to feel that relief. And so
Yes.
the more consistent you are with those things,
Mhm.
the more relief you're going to feel.
Ah, it's wonderful. You know, I've been hearing about cold plunges more and more. I have done a cold plunge once, but it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm a
They're
warm
not for the
water.
faint of heart.
No, I'm a warm water girl. I don't even go in the pool unless it's a certain,
Yeah.
a certain degree. So yeah, but the health benefits for some reason, it's just, adding these things, and also to be able to be portable. So what you have done is you've made it work with your lifestyle. And so
Hmm.
I think that's important. It's important for all of us to think through that, but to be proactive. Being proactive is really, really important. So, but you've been proactive. You found things that will work for you. I'm sure I'm going to have people looking up those portable, the portable cold plunge, and also that red light blanket, or to be able to do that, because that infrared, it has a lot of different benefits, and it doesn't really feel like it's going to do anything. It's just this light, but
Hmm.
for some reason,
Yep.
you know, yeah, there's a lot of there's these face masks, there's all sorts of things
All sorts of things. Yeah.
that work with that red light.
And the sauna blanket, when you're sweating out those toxins,
Mm-hmm.
that's just you're helping your body eliminate what's not good for it, and you're just giving it that little extra push that it needs to
Yes.
to do it. So,
Oh, that's great. That is so great. And I'm glad that there are some real proactive things that you've even mentioned now, for those who are at the
mhm,
point, they may not have exactly what you have, but there may be some benefits. I've talked to people with the menopause, or they're going through all of these stages, and some of this proactive may help them, and to be able,
absolutely.
and for men too. I'm married to a former professional athlete. I mean, the things that they face with their body not being able to do what it used to do is,
Yep.
it's a real mindset. I talk a lot
Mhm.
about mindset. It's a real mindset of just having to make decisions to, to not let this hold you down completely, and to stay in reasonable shape. It's not easy. It's just not
Yeah.
easy, as we
And the other
gratefully,
thing
yeah.
I think
Mhm.
we are such a busy society,
Yes.
and we are such of the mindset that self-care is indulgence versus
Mhm.
necessary, that
Mhm.
we tend to put some of this
Mhm.
aside.
Mhm.
Um, and if if you're the type of person that um, wants to make sure everybody else is taken care of before you take care of yourself,
Mhm.
we don't make time to do these things for ourselves. But
Yeah.
now, with the ease of being able to do some of these things at home,
Mhm.
and uh, y- of course, it takes discipline. You have to figure out when it works in your daily
Right.
schedule.
Mhm.
But if we do that, uh, I think over time we're only benefiting our bodies, and we are giving ourselves the pathway to feel better, as opposed to waking up every day going, "Oh my god, I don't feel this, or I feel
Yes.
that, or I can't, or I'm so tired, or I'm this, or I'm that." So,
Mhm.
I think if we take care of ourselves first, which
Mhm.
is not selfish, we
Mhm.
are much better suited to take care of others in our
Right.
lives, and to
Exactly.
do whatever it is that we are doing in our lives, whatever it is our job is, or our career, or
Mhm.
activities. So I think we have to get away from the stigma that self-care is
Mhm.
selfish,
Right. Right.
and instead we say self-care is caring, not only for
Yes.
ourselves, but for those that we care for.
Yes. Very, very good point. Well, if I have a just a quick question that I want you to leave us with, maybe one takeaway that people can, take away from this interview. But how much per year? I know it varies. It depends on the type of engagements and who's booking and all of that. How much? Because things are pretty much recuperated now or back to normal a little more on
Mhm.
touring. And after all the shutdowns, and how many months of the year do you tour, or is there is an approximate number each year, or how often you go on to the road?
So for me personally, I pick and choose.
Okay,
I pick
that's
and
smart.
choose where I go and when I go with my
Mhm,
husband. And primarily what decides that is either if I have or am doing an event somewhere in the area that's where he's going, or if we have friends or family in the area,
mhm,
or if it just happens to be an area that I love to visit.
mhm,
But as far as the band goes,
mhm.
they work 12 months out of the year. They'll
Okay.
finish this year. Now, this is today. if
Mhm,
if other shows come in, because I think there's maybe one or two weekends that they could add another show.
mm,
But he basically works every weekend. It's usually
okay.
typically Thursday to Sunday.
Mhm,
This year, there's a lot of leave on Wednesday, get home on Sunday. So they'll
mhm,
finish this year doing about 90, I think it's 93, 94 shows this year, which is a lot because
yes.
considering there's only 52 weeks in a year.
Yes.
Um, and there is no there is no time. It's not seasonal.
Right.
We basically prescribe the breaks.
Mhm,
We just say to the booking agent, we need this off, and we have to be realistic because you
mhm.
can't you can't do that kind of schedule and not
Right,
need a break. And
right,
everybody in the band has got wives and significant others at home, and they've
right.
got children, and
Families,
so
yes.
we have to be
Mhm,
conscious of that, and we want to allow, because another part of self-care is
mhm.
family time.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
so my husband's been in the band 45 years this year, and so back when his children were young, he missed a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
A lot of milestones that people are typically home for. And so,
Mhm,
I mean, my husband is basically the tour manager. We don't have a tour, we have a booking agent, and
mhm,
then he tour manages as well. And our band and our crew
mhm.
is family. And so
Yes.
we want to be conscious of their time as well. And
Right.
he knows what it's like
Yeah,
to miss kids' birthdays and
right.
holidays, and special things. And so
Right.
we try very, very hard to make all of that work. It's a challenge.
Yes.
I won't I won't deny that, trying to get
Mhm.
everybody home in time to do every little thing when you're moving 10 people around is crazy, but
Yes.
um we do it the best way we can,
Good.
and everybody feels pretty darn comfortable with it.
Oh, good, good. Well, if there's one tip that you can leave us with, what would that be?
It's kind of everything we've been talking about, but I'll sum it up really quickly. The first thing is, and it's exactly what I said a few minutes ago, people really need to get in the mindset that self-care is not
Mm.
selfish and
Mhm.
that it's important. And and then the second thing is to just really do your research and be
Mhm.
your own advocate with your healthcare providers,
Good, good.
because it's becoming difficult to have enough time with our providers where they just this, and this is what you need to do, and then they're out the door. So
Right.
go in armed, journal what happens in between visits, have your
Mm.
questions ready, and don't just take everything they say as the wherewithal and be withal.
Yep.
Challenge them if you feel differently. Be your own advocate.
Oh, I love that. Be your own advocate. Yes.
Hmm.
Well, how can people reach you? And then I will put all of this in the show notes as well. Everything will be in the show notes, and so people can be able to look you up and go right to your information. So, but I like you to be able to say it as well for those listening. So,
Sure. They can find me on my website, which is rhondabnelson.com,
mhm,
and they can drop me notes there. And they can also Instagram and Facebook is the same. And
mhm.
I get messages through both of those as well.
Good, good. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate this time. I mean, I always learn something through these interviews as well, and I really knew very little about AERD, and now I know a lot more. And I'm so glad that you are on a good path with it, managing it. Of course, there's no cure, as you said. So, but I'm really happy that you're managing it, and you're reaching out to help others, which is really important. And it's not just AERD, this covers a lot of chronic illness. My mom had fibromyalgia. She
Mhm.
struggled for years, and there's just, it's really difficult when you have any sort of autoimmune or anything like that, and you're going, "What is happening to my body?"
Right?
And there's a lot of questions. So, really, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you all for joining us this entire time, and make sure you connect with us. Of course, I have a new book out, and I have to do this on the podcast because I just got my first little copy of my Power
Oh,
of After. That is coming. You'll be able to get your own copy soon. After this is released. It's released, the book is officially released on Amazon on July 8th, but a great book, but really talking about moving on in life. Power of After. There's a whole new chapter, and
that's
doesn't
awesome.
yeah, we're at that stage. So thank you again for joining us, and for all of you, you can reach me, of course, at a number of different websites: Deborah Johnson at speaker.com, goalsforyourlife.com, djworksmusic.com, lots of different ways. So, and I will look forward to being with everyone again next time. So, bye bye for now. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show, and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.